and welcome back to my channel. Today we are making maple crullers. If you live in New York City, you've hopefully come across the most amazing maple crullers from Daily Provisions. And if you have, you know they are just the most perfect donuts, and you haven't and you live in NYC, then I urge you to go get and try them. However, today we'll be making our own, and all in under an hour. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to be gathering and weighing out all our ingredients. You'll be needing 130 grams or about 1 cup of bread flour. I got this little bag from Whole Foods for about $2.80. Next we'll need 113 grams or half a cup of unsalted butter. My go-to is always Kerrygold, which I always buy in bulk from Costco. Next we'll need about 227 grams or 1 cup of whole milk. I've only tried this with dairy, but I'm definitely happy to experiment with plant-based milk and report back to you all later. Finally, we'll need 3 large eggs and 1 additional egg white. Since these will be going in one by one later when we'll be making our pâte à choux, it'll be easier to have them separated now than dealing with that later. And finally, we'll need just 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Once we have all our ingredients ready, we'll then mix the milk, butter, sugar, and salt into a sauce pot and bring that to a boil over medium heat. And we're going to ignore just how dirty my stove is. You're gonna let this cook over medium heat and bring it to a boil. Now once this mixture starts to boil, that's when we're going to actually add in our flour. Once you've mixed in all your flour, you're going to keep mixing until this mixture with the flour actually comes to a boil as well. You should hopefully start to see a dough come together, and you'll want to keep mixing and stirring until you really get a rough but nice and smooth dough. Once that dough is ready, we're going to take it off the heat and transfer it to your stand mixer. We'll need a paddle attachment on that stand mixer. You'll then begin to beat this dough at medium speed and beat it until it comes to room temperature. Now, how do you check if it's at room temperature? Well, I, for one, have a metal bowl for my stand mixer, so I just keep touching the sides until it starts to essentially feel like it's much cooler than where it began. Of course, you can kind of, go every few minutes, turn off the stand mixer, and then dip your finger in quickly just to see how the dough feels. And while you're doing all of this, you'll probably notice a lot of steam escaping from the dough as it's being mixed, and don't worry, that is totally normal. And once the dough is cool enough, we're going to start adding in our eggs one by one at a very low speed. You'll want to ensure the egg is fully mixed before we're adding in the next one. You may notice that the dough starts to curdle or separate as you add maybe the first or second or even third egg, but that is totally fine. Just keep adding, mixing, have a little faith, and it should start to come together into a smooth and rather viscous dough. And once you have the dough prepared, we're then going to transfer this to a container that you can also close off at the top and move that dough to your fridge for at least 30 minutes. Now while that dough is in the fridge, we're going to actually start preparing for the next step, which is actually shaping and frying the donuts. What we're going to do is we're going to take a large piece of parchment paper and cut them into 8 4-inch squares, and then brush each side of those squares with some vegetable oil, or in my case, I just sprayed each one with some pan cooking spray and then use my pastry brush to evenly spread out that oil. Finally, once you have all your squares oiled up, you can then arrange them on a large sheet, which will make for moving everything around much easier. Now, as you get closer to the end of the 30 minutes, you'll want to get your fryer ready and start heating your oil. I'll admit I'm a little bit spoiled, and so I still actually have this electric deep fryer, which I had almost actually gotten rid of and donated a year or two ago because I honestly was not really using it anymore ever since I got my air fryer, but I'm so glad that never happened. So less work for me, but if you don't have one, no need to fret. You can actually just use a Dutch oven or a large pot and fill it with a few inches of oil. And you'll want to get that oil to about 360 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you are using a pot, what you'll want to do is also have a candy thermometer or some way of checking the temperature of your oil. And as you can see, it's been so long since I've used this deep fryer that I actually kind of forgot it all works. I struggled for a few minutes just to figure out how to turn the damn thing on. Once the 30 minutes are up, what we're gonna do then is transfer the dough to our piping bag, which is always the most exciting part. Now, if you ever worked with piping bags, they can be super frustrating and a super pain in the ass to deal with when you're trying to scoop in all that dough into the bag. So I recently learned of this cool trick. Basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take all that dough, transfer it to the center of a plastic wrap, and then wrap that up and then really tie off each side. And then what you can do with that parcel of dough is actually basically slip it into your piping bag and cut the tip off from one end. And this should hopefully make it much easier. Also, it's important to note that I'm using a 828 Ateco Open Star tip, which you can get off Amazon for I think about $5, but I just went to my local cake decorating store and it was also, you know, $5 there as well. You'll then pipe each donut onto your prepared parchment square, making a nice circle. Don't worry if there's a little overlap, which you kind of want. And you'll keep shaping each donut one by one. Once you've shaped all of your donuts, you're gonna pop them into the freezer for 15 minutes, and there's no need to cover them over with anything. Finally, while those donuts are freezing, what we're gonna do is actually prepare our maple glaze, which gives these crullers that all familiar maple cruller flavor. Because what you'll notice actually if you have to taste some of your pâte à choux dough is it's rather basically bland. Which when I was making these for the first time I got a little bit worried and was wondering, I hope this comes out right, but just trust the process. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna get a large bowl and you're gonna measure out 1.5 cups of confectioner sugar. You'll wanna whisk it a little bit just to break up any clumps. Then we're gonna mix in a pinch of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of light corn syrup, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and 1 teaspoon of maple extract. I technically bought a maple emulsion, but I was told it's basically the same thing. And finally, 2 tablespoons of dark maple syrup. You're gonna mix this mixture well, and you're gonna notice it's actually quite tough to work with. Don't worry, because we're now gonna add in 2 tablespoons of hot water. And I just used my tap for this, and what you'll notice, it'll start to form a nice kind of glaze texture to it. And what I did was I actually tasted it at this point and kind of decided for myself if I wanted to enhance a little bit more of the flavor, so I actually added just a little bit more maple syrup and extract to mine. I also added in a little bit more hot water just to make it a little bit thinner and easier to work with. But you do you, boo-boo. By now, it should have been 15 minutes, and so we can actually bring those donuts out of the freezer. Depending on the size of your fryer, you'll have room for at least 2 to 3 donuts at a time. So you'll slide those donuts in upside downish into your oil, and what you'll notice is the donuts actually separate from the parchment paper, so at that point you can then take the parchment paper out of the fryer using kitchen tongs. Please don't use your hands. And they should cook for about 2.5 minutes on the first side, and then another 2 minutes or so on the other. You'll then flip it again one more time and cook it for another 30 or 60 seconds more. Then once they're done cooking, you're going to take them out and place them onto a wire rack with paper towels underneath, and repeat this process with your remaining donuts. Now, I didn't get to really film this part exactly because I was kind of doing a lot of things at once, but while my other donuts were cooking, after the donuts that were just cooked had cooled for about a minute or two, I then picked them up and dunked them in my glaze and returned them to the wire rack to let any of the excess drip off. Now, once all my donuts were cooked, I noticed I did have some glaze left over, so I actually went back and dipped each donut one more time just to add a little bit more something, if you know what I mean. And just like that, you have fresh maple crullers. Bon appetit.